It was a typical Wednesday evening when I returned home from work. The day had been long, and all I wanted was to kick back and relax with Sarah, my wife of 7 years. As I approached the front door, I heard hushed whispers coming from inside. The sound was barely audible, like secrets shared in the dead of night. My heart raced as I cautiously entered the house. The living room light was dim, casting eerie shadows on the walls. The soft murmurs grew louder as I moved closer, making me feel like an intruder in my own home. Dread settled in the pit of my stomach. The sight that greeted me in the living room stopped me in my tracks. There, on our cozy sofa, sat Sarah. But she wasn't alone. A man I had never seen before was locked in a passionate embrace with her. Their lips were inches apart, their eyes locked in a desperate longing. Time seemed to stand still as I took in the scene, my mind struggling to process what I was witnessing. They quickly separated, their faces filled with guilt and shock. Sarah's eyes, usually so warm and familiar, were now brimming with tears. The stranger, disheveled and clearly caught off guard, scrambled to gather his belongings. I couldn't speak. My voice had abandoned me, leaving me mute and helpless. Sarah, her cheeks flushed and her hair disarrayed, finally found her words. She stammered, trying to explain herself, but the words seemed to get lost in the air, leaving only the heavy silence between us. The stranger, in a desperate bid to escape this uncomfortable situation, hurriedly made a hasty exit. I watched as he disappeared through the front door, the sound of his hurried footsteps echoing in my ears. Sarah turned to me, her face a portrait of devastation. She began to sob uncontrollably, her tears staining the very couch on which she had betrayed our trust. Her pleas for forgiveness filled the room, a cacophony of remorse and desperation. I demanded to know who the man was and how long this had been going on. My voice, previously lost, had returned with a vengeance. Anger and confusion surged within me, pushing me to seek answers to the questions that were tearing my world apart. Sarah confessed that it had been happening for several months. Months. The word hung heavy in the air, a reminder of the countless lies and deceit that had festered beneath the surface of our marriage. The weight of those months crushed me, leaving me breathless and bewildered. As the tears streamed down Sarah's face, I couldn't help but wonder if there were others involved. Was this a one-time mistake, or had she been living a secret life, hidden from my view? The uncertainty gnawed at my soul, adding another layer of complexity to an already tangled web of emotions. In that moment, I faced a choice between forgiveness and vengeance, between rebuilding and tearing it all down. The future of our marriage hung in the balance, and my heart was torn between love and betrayal. My wife, Sarah, was locked in a passionate embrace with a man I had never seen before. My keys hit the table with a clatter as I stood there, frozen. It was like a scene out of a movie, one I never expected to play out in my own living room. They quickly separated, their faces filled with guilt and shock. Sarah's cheeks flushed crimson, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape route. The stranger, disheveled and clearly caught off guard, mumbled something unintelligible and began gathering his scattered belongings. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My heart pounded in my chest like a jackhammer, and a million thoughts raced through my mind. Who was this guy? And what the hell was he doing here with my wife? Sarah's eyes welled up with tears as she stammered to explain herself. Her voice quivered, barely audible over the ringing in my ears. I can explain, she managed to choke out, but her words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of betrayal. The stranger, in a desperate bid to escape this uncomfortable situation, hurriedly made a hasty exit. I watched him, my anger boiling just beneath the surface. He slinked out the door, and I knew that this was far from over. Turning my gaze back to Sarah, my voice trembled with a mixture of anger and sadness. Explain what, Sarah? I demanded, my hands balled into fists at my sides. Who is he, and how long has this been going on? Tears streamed down Sarah's face as she struggled to find the right words. It's complicated, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Please, just let me explain. I felt a tumultuous mix of emotions, anger, betrayal, confusion. My mind raced as I tried to make sense of it all. The room felt suffocating, the air heavy with tension. Sarah's explanations were a jumbled mess of half-truths and excuses. She spoke of loneliness, of feeling neglected, but her words couldn't justify what I had just witnessed. The man's presence in our home was a stark reminder that our marriage was far from perfect. As the minutes ticked by, Sarah's tears continued to fall, and my anger began to ebb, replaced by a deep sadness. It was clear that we were both victims of our own failures, our own inability to communicate and connect. But in that moment, with the stranger's presence still lingering in the air, forgiveness seemed like an impossible choice. Our marriage had been shaken to its core, and the path forward was uncertain. Hey there, if you're enjoying this content, please consider giving it a thumbs up and hitting that subscribe button below. Your support helps us create more great videos like this one. Don't forget to also click the notification bell so you never miss an update from us. Thanks for watching. Sarah began to sob uncontrollably, her tears falling like a torrential rain. I stood there, watching her crumble, unable to ignore the raw pain in her eyes. But I needed answers, and they wouldn't come through her tears alone. I need to know, Sarah, I said, my voice firm. Who is he, and how long has this been going on? Her sobs continued, but she finally managed to speak between gasps for air. His name is David, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. And it's been happening for several months. My mind raced with questions about how I could have missed the signs. Sarah and I had been together for 7 years, and I thought I knew her better than anyone else. How had I been so blind to this? How had I failed to see the cracks in our marriage? Anger and betrayal swirled inside me, but beneath it all was a deep sense of hurt. I had trusted Sarah with my heart, and now it felt shattered. I took a step back, needing some distance to process everything. My gaze wandered around the room, landing on the family photos on the wall. There we were, smiling in each one, our love captured in frozen moments. How had it all come to this? Sarah's sobs continued to fill the room, a constant reminder of the pain we were both feeling. I turned back to her, my emotions a jumbled mess. Why, Sarah? I asked, my voice cracking with emotion. Why did you do this? She wiped her tears away with the back of her hand and tried to explain herself. I felt neglected, she began, her words hesitant. I thought you didn't care anymore, and David was there for me when I needed someone. I couldn't deny that our marriage had been strained lately. Work, stress, and the daily grind had taken their toll on us. But I never imagined it would lead to this. As I looked at Sarah, her mascara-streaked cheeks and red, swollen eyes, I realized that we were both victims of our own failures. We had let our relationship drift, and now we were paying the price. The room fell into a heavy silence, the weight of our shattered trust hanging in the air. The road ahead seemed uncertain, filled with anger, pain, and a profound sense of betrayal. I couldn't help but wonder if there were others involved. The thought gnawed at me like a persistent itch. Was David the only one? Or were there more secrets hidden in the shadows of our marriage? The uncertainty clawed at my insides, making it hard to breathe. Sarah's pleas for another chance tugged at my heartstrings. As she stood there, her tear-stained face filled with regret, I couldn't help but remember the years of love and laughter we had shared. Our journey together had been filled with ups and downs, but I never thought it would come to this. I promise, I'll do anything to make it right, she whispered, her voice fragile, like a delicate glass about to shatter. I decided to ask her to leave for the night so I could think. It wasn't a decision I took lightly, but I needed space to clear my head, away from the suffocating atmosphere of our home. Sarah agreed, her eyes filled with resignation and a glimmer of hope. As the door closed behind her, I found myself alone in our once happy home. The silence was deafening, broken only by the faint echoes of her pleas for forgiveness. I couldn't escape the weight of the situation, no matter where I turned. I stayed up all night, wrestling with my emotions and doubts. Sleep eluded me as I replayed the scenes from earlier in the evening over and over in my mind. The anger, the betrayal, the heartache, they all swirled together in a maelstrom of confusion. The hours passed like an eternity, and as the first rays of dawn crept through the curtains, I felt a deep exhaustion wash over me. The decision I faced was one of the most significant in my life, and I couldn't make it lightly. With the new day came a sense of clarity. I knew I couldn't let anger and betrayal define the rest of my life. I needed to confront Sarah, to have an honest conversation about the state of our marriage and whether it could ever be rebuilt. The hours had ticked by, but the dawn brought with it the glimmer of a new beginning, a chance to make sense of the tangled mess our lives had become. It wouldn't be easy, but it was time to face the truth, no matter how painful it might be. The next morning, I couldn't shake off the heaviness in my chest. The sun pierced through the curtains, reminding me that life had to go on, even if it was in disarray. I knew I couldn't simply ignore what had happened the night before. It was time to face the truth, no matter how painful it might be. I began to investigate further, driven by a need for answers. It felt like a detective's job, a role I had never expected to play in my own life. I searched for evidence of her infidelity, my heart pounding with each discovery. Text messages and emails became my trail of breadcrumbs, leading me deeper into a world I never knew existed. The messages were hidden in plain sight, but their contents were a damning revelation. David's name appeared repeatedly, their words filled with a longing that cut me to the core. Each piece of evidence painted a more painful picture of her deception. The truth was uglier than I could have imagined, and the pit in my stomach deepened with every scroll of my phone's screen. I couldn't fathom how long this betrayal had been going on, but the evidence pointed to a history I had been oblivious to. Finally armed with undeniable proof, I couldn't avoid the confrontation any longer. I found Sarah sitting at the kitchen table, her eyes red and puffy from crying. She looked up as I approached, her face a mask of guilt and fear. I laid the evidence in front of her, each message and email a painful reminder of her betrayal. Her eyes welled up with fresh tears as she realized there was no denying it any longer. "Why, Sarah?" I asked, my voice shaking with a mix of anger and sorrow. "How could you do this to us?" She didn't have an answer, at least not one that could erase the pain she had caused. Her silence spoke volumes, and the weight of our shattered trust hung heavy in the air. As the tears streamed down her face, I knew that this confrontation was just the beginning of a long and painful journey. Our marriage had been irrevocably changed, and the road ahead was uncertain and fraught with challenges. But one thing was clear: I couldn't turn a blind eye to the truth any longer. Sarah swore that it was a mistake and that she wanted to make amends. Her voice trembled as she pleaded for forgiveness, her eyes locked onto mine as if trying to find a lifeline in my gaze. It was hard to ignore the turmoil in her, the regret for the choices that had brought us to this point. "I messed up, big time," she admitted, her words heavy with guilt. "But I love you, and I want to fix this, whatever it takes." I sat across from her, torn between the love I had for the woman who had been my partner for 7 years and the betrayal I couldn't shake off. The idea of rebuilding our marriage felt like an impossible mountain to climb, but there was still a glimmer of hope buried beneath the wreckage. Friends and family started to learn about our marital crisis. It was hard to keep such a deeply personal matter hidden. News of our troubles spread like wildfire, and soon, our closest confidants were offering their opinions and advice. Some urged me to give her a second chance, emphasizing the years we had invested in our relationship. They believed in forgiveness and the idea that love could conquer all, even the darkest of secrets. Others questioned if I had played a role in her actions. Doubts began to creep in, and I couldn't help but wonder if I had neglected our marriage without realizing it. Had I been too focused on work and other responsibilities? It was a painful self-examination, one that made me question my own shortcomings. The voices of those around me, well-intentioned as they were, only added to the confusion swirling inside my head. I felt like a ship adrift in a storm, and the decision I faced weighed heavily on my shoulders. Sarah's promises to change and make amends tugged at my heartstrings. It was impossible to forget the love we had shared, the memories we had built together. But the wounds were deep, and the scars would be a permanent reminder of the pain we had endured. As the days passed, I grappled with the choice before me, knowing that whatever decision I made would shape the rest of our lives. Our marriage hung in the balance, teetering on the edge of redemption or dissolution. And no matter which path I chose, there would be no going back to the way things were before. I felt torn between my love for Sarah and the betrayal I had endured. It was a battle raging within me, love clashing with the hurt and anger that had taken root. I wanted to believe that our love could conquer all, but the scars ran deep, and I couldn't ignore the pain that had been inflicted. Sarah suggested we attend couples therapy to work through our issues. It was a step she hoped would bridge the chasm that had opened between us. I could see the desperation in her eyes, the fear of losing the life we had built together. I agreed to give therapy a chance, hoping it would save our marriage. The first session was like stepping into the unknown. Our problems laid bare for a stranger to dissect. The therapist's office was a safe haven, a place where we could lay our truths on the table without fear of judgment. The therapist delved into the deep-seated issues in our relationship. With each session, we peeled back the layers of our history, exposing the wounds we had both inflicted and endured. It was uncomfortable, like cleaning out an old, neglected wound, but it was necessary for healing. As the weeks passed, I struggled with trust and insecurity. The therapist's questions often felt like a magnifying glass, highlighting the doubts and fears that had festered within me. Sarah's attempts to rebuild our trust were met with resistance, and I couldn't help but wonder if the damage was irreversible. The ultimate decision of whether to forgive and rebuild or end the marriage weighed heavily on my mind. Therapy had brought us closer in some ways, but it had also unearthed uncomfortable truths. The love I felt for Sarah still existed, but it was tainted by the knowledge of her betrayal. In the end, the therapist's office became a battleground of emotions. Forgiveness seemed like an elusive goal, and the scars of betrayal ran deep. The decision loomed over us, a storm on the horizon, and I couldn't help but wonder if our love could weather the tempest or if it would be swept away by the winds of change. In the end, it all came down to one pivotal moment, a moment of reckoning that would define the course of our future. The weight of the therapist's words hung in the air as we sat in the small, dimly lit office. Forgiveness, the therapist said, is a choice. It's not about forgetting or condoning the past, but deciding if the love and the history you share are worth the effort to rebuild. I exchanged a glance with Sarah, both of us acutely aware that this was the crossroads we had been hurtling toward. The therapist's words echoed in our minds as we considered the path ahead. The weeks of therapy had been a roller coaster of emotions, forcing us to confront our deepest insecurities and wounds. We had unearthed the root causes of our issues, but the scars of betrayal still lingered. Trust, once shattered, was like a fragile vase glued back together it might hold, but the cracks would always be visible. Sarah's remorse had been palpable, her efforts to make amends sincere. The love we had shared for so long hadn't vanished, but it had been shaken to its core. The decision weighed on me like a boulder, and it was time to either lift it together or let it crush what remained of our marriage. I want to try, Sarah said, her voice unwavering as she looked into my eyes. I want to rebuild what we had, even if it takes a lifetime. The sincerity in her words cut through the doubts that had clouded my judgment. Maybe, just maybe, we could emerge from this crucible stronger than before. I nodded, my own resolve firming. I want to try too, I admitted, my voice laced with vulnerability. But know that it won't be easy, and it won't happen overnight. The therapist offered a reassuring smile, a beacon of hope in the storm. It's a journey, not a destination, she said. But with commitment, effort, and time, love can overcome even the most daunting of obstacles. As we left the therapist's office that day, we held each other's hands, our fingers interlocked with a promise of a fresh start. The future remained uncertain, and the scars would always remind us of the pain we had endured, but love had the power to heal, to rebuild, and to mend what had been broken. Our journey had just begun, and as we faced the horizon, we did so with hope and determination. The ultimate decision had been made: forgiveness and a second chance, but only time would reveal if our love could indeed weather the tempest and emerge. My name is John Smith. I met my wife Kay, who's 4 years older than me, at a sports gym. I work as an instructor. Kay came for a trial lesson. During these lessons, we first measure the client's body stats, then show them around the gym, and teach them how to use the machines. The instructor for trial lessons changes weekly. Appointments can be made online. Kay had booked for 10 a.m. I could tell she was the one as soon as I saw her wandering around. I'm Kay, here for the trial lesson. Hi, I'm John. Thank you for booking a trial lesson. That was our first conversation. Honestly, I was surprised at how slim Kay was when I first saw her. I wondered why she even came to the gym. Later, she told me she wanted to build some muscle. After the trial lesson, she decided to join the gym. Over time, as she came more often, Kay discreetly gave me her contact information. It was the first time a woman had approached me, so I thought it was a prank. But we started talking, went on dates, and eventually got married. Kay wanted a big wedding, so we had it in Hawaii. Our gym friends even flew out to join us. I met Kay's best friend, Emily, and her old college friend, Mike, for the first time there. Our marriage was fulfilling. When I was single, I used to eat store-bought meals alone. But after marriage, I'd come home to a lit house, a delicious meal, and a warm bath waiting for me. And of course, Kay would greet me with a smile. However, our happiness was short-lived. One big reason was our inability to have children, something we both desired. We both liked children. We thought it would happen quickly. But even after 2, 3 years, there was no sign. By the 4th year, we decided to get tested. Finding a cause might have brought some closure. But unfortunately, there was nothing wrong with either of us. It was just a matter of timing. We were both healthy, but we couldn't conceive. It made us think maybe it was about compatibility or fate. My feelings must have shown because I accidentally made Kay cry one night. A news program was featuring children. They're so adorable. I blurted out innocently. Realizing my mistake, I quickly changed the channel. Why are you changing it? I thought it might bother you. It's you who's bothered. Wait, calm down. I am calm. You're the one treating me like I'm fragile, she said, breaking into tears. After that, we stopped talking about children altogether when children are shown on TV. We no longer brought up the topic. The tension was suffocating. So, I took up fishing, a hobby suggested by my gym buddies. Unfortunately, the friend who recommended it had a completely different schedule, so I couldn't learn from him, and that's when Kay introduced me to Mike. According to Kay, he is an expert fisherman who even owns a boat. Being my wife's best friend, I was pretty nervous at first. Hello, nice to meet you. Well, not for the first time, but it's the first time we're actually having a conversation. I'm really happy to have another fishing buddy. Mike was incredibly kind and did a great job easing my nerves. His fishing skills were as impressive as Kay had said. He was very easygoing and enjoyable to be with. Spending my days off fishing became an escape from the cooling relationship with Kay. Since I was spending every weekend fishing, I started to worry about Kay, so I suggested a weekend trip for the three of us. Mike booked the stay at a lodge in Asheville. I'm sorry for intruding on your couple's trip. Don't be silly. You're not intruding. Thanks for booking that famous lodge. Well, you said Kay wanted to go there. You remembered. I hadn't paid much attention at the time, but thinking back, there might have been something more to their conversation. Let's drop off our bags at the lodge and go night fishing. Night fishing? That sounds great. I've never done it before. I knew Mr. Smith was curious about it. Thank you. Even after all these weeks, aren't the two of you still calling each other mister? Mike and I looked at each other. She might be right. Maybe it's time we drop the formalities today. Sounds good. If anyone uses mister, they owe me $10. $10 is too much. I meant, it's a deal. $10 it is. I was surprised to see a side of Kay I never saw at home, lively and youthful in her conversation. Night fishing was a blast. The fish's eyes gleamed blue in the water, creating a magical scene. The technique was different from daytime fishing, moving the rod up and down along the pier wall. Even Kay, a beginner, could do it easily and caught the most fish, thanks to beginner's luck. We had a late dinner in our room. We enjoyed a feast of seafood. It was a delightful meal for both our eyes and stomach. After eating, we took a bath. Mike, feeling tired, opted for the shower in our room. Did he feel awkward intruding on our couple's time? Since we were all close, we decided to sleep in the same room, setting up our beds side by side. It feels like we're back in college. It sure does. I went to an all-boys school. That must have been boring. Hey, don't insult my youth. It was fun in its own way. I kinda envy the all-boys experience. It was just smelly and miserable. We all laughed. I wish these fun times could last forever. It felt like a friendship between men and women that I had never experienced in my youth. All thanks to Mike. I'm not great with alcohol, so I fell asleep at some point. I woke up around 4 a.m. It was still dark outside. I have a terrible hangover headache, probably from the leftover alcohol. It was fun, but I probably got carried away. Then, in the darkness, I heard voices. I thought of asking Kay to bring me some water, if she was awake. It's hard to break up, but if it's for happiness, it's worth it. Break up. Squinting in the darkness, I could faintly make out a shocking scene. My face turned pale. Kay and Mike were holding hands and gazing into each other's eyes. It's us, Mike. Don't worry about anything. Thanks, Kay. I trust you. I love you. Hearing their conversation, I hesitantly turned on the light. As the room brightened, they were indeed holding hands. But they quickly let go, surprised by my awakening. What's going on? I blurted out. You were up? What is this? Holding hands. I heard you two talking. What is it about breaking up, about loving each other? June, you're misunderstanding. Mike, stay out of this. I'm talking to Kay. You're misunderstanding. This isn't what it looks like. Are you kidding me? This is a joke. Just calm down. How can I calm down? Let me explain. Mike, just stay quiet. But, exactly, that's the problem. Ever since we met as a trio, I felt something more than friendship in your conversations. Were you two together all along? We're just friends, nothing more. Who would believe that after seeing this? I feel betrayed, Mike. I thought we had become friends, but was it just because you had a thing with Kay? That's not true. There's really nothing going on. So, you're both denying it. Have you been enjoying fooling me? Coming on this trip must have been convenient. Enough already. We're telling you there's nothing between us. Huh. Now you're getting defensive. Is this why we couldn't have kids? Because you were with him. What are you talking about? Were you making sure we couldn't conceive because you were with him? That's horrible. Horrible? That's my line. Get out. Leave me right now. Fine. Let's go, Mike. Kay said. But, just go, both of you. They left the room. I had never been so angry. My feelings of betrayal exploded uncontrollably. I couldn't stop it. Kay and Mike having an affair. Why hadn't I suspected it from the beginning? Mike is of the opposite sex. Does a best friend of the opposite sex exist? But strangely, I had trusted Mike. That's why it hurt even more. I had always wanted children. Alone in the room, I cried. How stupid of me. After about an hour alone, I decided to leave the lodge in Asheville. It was chilly in the early morning. The cold wind seemed to pierce my heart. Mike had already paid for the lodge. I'll get every penny of alimony. I took the train back home. As I started to calm down and plan to talk things over with Kay, I found she had left with all her belongings. Reluctantly, I called Mike. It's me, John. I'm really sorry about earlier. I didn't mean to cause a misunderstanding. I'll talk to you later about this, Mike. Right now, I can't find Kay. Do you know where she is? No, I haven't seen her since then. Okay, thanks. Wait, what? Maybe she's at Emily's. Emily? Yes, I'll try there. I didn't want to talk more with Mike, so I hung up abruptly. I called Emily. Sure enough, Kay was at her place. I went over to talk to Kay. She continued to deny everything. Emily excused herself because it was a marital problem. She left us to talk alone. I lost my temper earlier. I'm sorry for overreacting, but you're the one who betrayed me. I want the truth. How long have you and Mike been involved? No matter how many times you ask, Mike and I are just friends. Kay, there's a limit to lying. Tell me the truth. There's nothing between me and Mike. Really? Then her phone rang. It was Mike. Answer it. Not now. If there's nothing to hide, talk in front of me. Fine. She snapped, answering the call. Hello? Yes, I'm okay. I'll explain everything. Please don't do that. Remember what happened last time? Don't worry about me. I'll call you back later. Her concern for Mike infuriated me again. What did Mike say? I'm sorry. You were right. So you admit it? Yes. Since when? A long time ago. This is absurd. I'm sorry. I always wanted kids, 2 kids. But I never said anything to avoid hurting you. I told her. That hurt me even more. She replied. So, an affair was your answer. This betrayal is how it ends. Kay said nothing. I felt a sense of resignation towards my wife. Let's get a divorce. I'll pay back the money by working. Mike could ask his parents to cover with no problem. But I want nothing to do with you or him ever again. I won't ask for alimony. I declared, leaving the room. The next day, we went to the courthouse to file for divorce. It's been 3 years since the divorce. I haven't seen Kay since. I'm still working at the gym. I haven't gone fishing since then either. I want to, but it brings back painful memories. I guess fishing isn't the problem. Maybe it's time to start again. I thought to myself. That's when I saw a familiar face at the gym. It was Mike. John, you have a visitor. It's been a while. What brings you here now? Sorry for showing up unannounced. If you have time, maybe we could have a cup of coffee nearby. Sure. We went to a nearby diner. I'll have the chicken sandwich plate. Same for me. Right away. I really needed to talk to you today about something. What is it? I wanted to apologize for that day. I had no idea you two had divorced. You must have known. No, I really didn't. You still doubt me. I've been overseas for training to take over my family's business. The hotel management? Yes. Where to start? That day, I was consulting Kay about a marriage proposal I received. My parents wanted me to marry a daughter of a financier. But I didn't want to get married. Because of your relationship with Kay? No. Hear me out. It's not that I didn't want to get married. I couldn't marry a woman. I might look like a man, but I've always felt like a woman inside. So you're... Yes, exactly. I've felt this way since I can remember. I've been struggling with the conflict between my body and my feelings. My parents noticed I was different, but my father is very traditional and still hasn't accepted it. My mother just follows what he says. No one, not even my parents, understood me. Kay was the only one who did. That day, I was torn between agreeing to the arranged marriage or refusing it and going abroad. If I refused, I might be disowned by my parents. Going abroad meant I would have no one on my side. It was a lonely thought, being away from Kay. That's why you said it would be lonely to part ways. I've always hidden my gender dysphoria for the sake of my family. I've been suppressing my true feelings, wearing clothes I didn't want to wear, speaking words I didn't want to say. I hid it all through school life, but I couldn't bear it when it came to romantic feelings. I wrote a letter to a boy I liked and put it in his locker. He replied, calling me to the back of the school. I was excited, but when I got there, several boys were waiting. They laughed and dressed me to prove I was different and took pictures. Even the boy I liked joined in, calling me disgusting. That's terrible. Nobody understood me. When I finally mustered the courage, this was the result. Somehow, I ended up on the rooftop, thinking of ending my life. But then, Kay stopped me. She and I had known each other since kindergarten, but we never really talked much. I was shy and quiet. She was beautiful, smart, everyone's idol. She took my hand, led me to the classroom, and read the letter out loud in front of the boy I liked, who had a crush on her. The boy's cheeks turned bright red and shouted at her to stop reading. She finished, tore up the letter. It doesn't matter what you look like. He is a million times better than someone with a rotten core. I like Mike so much more than you. Then she took my hand, and we walked away. She sounds like a hero. To me, she was. We started talking every day after that. Kay sort of knew about my gender dysphoria all along. Thanks to her, the bullies stopped bothering me, and school became enjoyable. All that happened to you. Even after graduation, I couldn't come out because of my parents, so I've been living with this secret. It's been really tough. I couldn't stand up to my parents, and occasionally, I sought advice from Kay. That day, she also shared about her marriage and fertility issues with me. I wanted to apologize after you heard us talking, but I had to refuse the marriage proposal that day. If I missed a chance, I would have been under my parents' control again. So, it was like that. You two were just friends. It was all my misunderstanding. Of course, Kay and I are of opposite sex. Anyone would doubt it. You weren't wrong. But Kay never talked about me. She believed you would understand and trust her. I see. I only found out the truth recently. When I returned to my hometown, I met Kay's parents and learned about the divorce and that she had a child. What? You didn't know? I was speechless. Given my past suicidal thoughts, Kay never spoke about my gender dysphoria to anyone, probably not even to you. I think she's still waiting for you, hoping you'd return. After meeting her parents, I left without seeing Kay. I came back to apologize to you and tell you the whole story. Thank you for sharing such a painful story. I appreciate it. It's my fault. Please go see her soon. Right. I wanted to go see Kay immediately. I drove to her parents' house. Her parents were surprised to see me. Please let me talk to your daughter. Kay came out of the house. Let's talk outside. We walked to a nearby park. All the while, I pondered how to apologize to Kay. I hadn't trusted her, harbored insecurities in our marriage, and I failed to understand her struggles. Maybe if I had listened more, she would have told me about Mike. You came because Mike told you, didn't you? Yes. Mom and Dad must have told him everything, even though I kept silent. You heard about Mike? Yes, he told me. I'm sure you were surprised. I was. But more than that, I realized I owed you an apology. People believe what they see. Anyone might have doubted me and Mike, but I always thought, deep down, you would trust me. But you didn't. I couldn't stand the assumptions about our childlessness too. I'm truly sorry. Looking back, I realize I was also at fault. I didn't talk about Mike and just acted like we were just girlfriends. I couldn't share about Mike. He thinks he saved me, but it was the other way around. I was feeling the same way he did at that time. What? My parents' business was failing and we had debts. They were constantly fighting. My dad became erratic and I was lonely. That's when I saved Mike. He was so grateful and always wanted to thank me. His help got my dad's business back on track. I couldn't talk to anyone about my feelings, but Mike was different. Even after my parents remarried, he listened to my complicated feelings. So, I wanted to support him in return. That's why I never told you. I realized too late that I couldn't go back. I thought you'd be happier with someone who could give you children. And then, ironically, I found out I was pregnant after the divorce. I've been raising our child alone. Recently, I started to hope that maybe you'd come back for us, even though it seemed impossible. I've come back. I exclaimed loudly. Yes. I'm sorry I made you wait. Kay's mother appeared with a child who ran towards us. Halfway through, the child let go and ran by himself. Tyler, do you know who this is? Dad? I was stunned. I told him his dad was working far away, believing you'd come back someday. I see. Tyler, I'm sorry I made you wait. Dad, you're home. I'm home. I hugged my son, wiping away tears. Kay cried too. Thank you for waiting. I'm not perfect, but let's be a family again. I'll never hurt you again, and I will protect you too with my life. Kay cried and nodded. I took Tyler's hand, and we walked home together. Is 3 years a long or short time? I am ready to make up for lost time with abundant love. I will never. The clock struck 11 p.m., and the other side of the bed was still empty. Working late again, she had texted, a message that had become all too familiar over the past few weeks. I tried to shake off the unsettling feeling, telling myself it was just the demands of her new job, but things started adding up, or rather, they didn't. Her phone, once open and accessible, now required a password I didn't know. Whispered conversations in the other room and quick exits to take calls had become the norm. It wasn't just the late nights, it was the secrecy that gnawed at me. Mike said he saw her with someone at Marcos. Looked cozy. A friend's voice echoed in my head, a statement I had initially dismissed. Stress, I had convinced myself, was making me paranoid, misinterpreting innocent interactions. However, the same friend pulled me aside weeks later, his expression grave. "I've got proof," he whispered, sliding his phone across the table. The image on the screen, a candid shot of her laughing with someone I didn't recognize, felt like a punch in the gut. Confrontation was inevitable. "Is there something you need to tell me?" I asked that evening, her arrival interrupting the silence of our now cold living room. The question hung in the air, a palpable tension building between us. "There's nothing to tell. You're being paranoid," she retorted, her defense as swift as it was sharp. The denial was expected, yet it stung, the accusation of distrust adding salt to the open wound. The evidence was undeniable, yet her words attempted to sow the seed of doubt in my mind. Was I misinterpreting the situation? Or was the foundation of our marriage truly crumbling? The quest for truth became my sole focus, propelling me into a whirlwind of actions and decisions that would irreversibly change our lives. As shadows lengthened and the office buildings emptied, I found myself parked a discreet distance from her workplace. Anxiety gnawed my stomach, but determination steeled my resolve. When she finally emerged, her hurried steps didn't head towards home, but to a secluded park bathed in the golden hues of the setting sun. I followed, a silent specter in her wake. There, under the guise of anonymity provided by the dimming light, she met him. Their embrace, long and tender, shattered any lingering denials within me. From behind the cover of a tree, I captured their betrayal with my phone, each click a hammer to my heart. Fueled by a mix of rage and despair, I confronted him the next day. "Stay away from my wife," I demanded, my voice a controlled calm that belied the turmoil inside. He reeled back, genuine shock etched on his features. "I thought she was single," he stammered, his admission doing little to quell the storm within me. Armed with undeniable evidence, I faced her that evening. The photos laid bare on the table between us served as the silent accuser in our confrontation. Her initial attempts at denial quickly crumbled under the weight of proof. "I felt neglected," she confessed, her voice a mix of defiance and sorrow. The words struck me, a poignant reminder of the distance that had grown between us. Our argument spiraled, a maelstrom of accusations, justifications, and hurt. Yet, beneath the tumult lay a stark realization. The foundation of our marriage had cracked, not from this singular act of betrayal, but from a gradual erosion of connection and understanding. The path forward was uncertain, fraught with pain and the daunting task of rebuilding, should we choose it. But in that moment, the immediate agony of betrayal overshadowed all else, a vivid scar upon the fabric of our shared life. The moment hung between us, charged and heavy. "You need to choose," I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. Her eyes, once familiar and warm, now held a tumultuous sea of indecision and fear. "Please, I need time to think," she whispered, her pleas slicing through the remnants of my resolve. That night, the walls of our home felt suffocating, each photograph a stark reminder of happier times now tainted. In search of solace, I sought refuge at a friend's house, a temporary escape from the storm that had become my life. The silence there allowed my thoughts to race, contemplating futures I had never envisioned. The following day, amidst a haze of disbelief and anger, I found myself sitting across from a lawyer, discussing divorce proceedings. "Are you sure about this?" the lawyer asked, his voice a tether to the reality of the situation. I wasn't sure of anything anymore. But then, she reached out, her voice laced with regret and desperation. "It was a mistake. Can we try to fix this?" she asked. Against the counsel of friends and the jagged shards of my pride, I agreed to counseling sessions. A part of me clung to the hope of salvaging the ruins of our marriage. Counseling sessions began, a sterile room attempting to contain the raw, unruly emotions between us. She seemed distant during these sessions, her commitment as absent as the ring that once circled her finger. Doubt gnawed at me, a relentless companion whispering dark thoughts. Then, one evening, a glimpse of her phone shattered the precarious peace we had built. Messages, unmistakably planning to meet him again, flashed before my eyes, a digital confession of her unresolved feelings. The betrayal wasn't just repeated, it was deepened, reinforcing the chasm that had opened between us. Confronted with this new evidence, I was thrust back into the tempest of betrayal and hurt. The counseling, the attempts at reconciliation, all felt like a facade, a cruel charade played at the expense of my hope and forgiveness. The path forward was now shrouded in uncertainty and pain, a journey through the aftermath of broken vows and shattered trust. The air was thick with tension as we stepped out of the counselor's office, the last session ending on a note far from resolution. My mind raced, replaying the discovery of her messages, a fresh wound on an already battered heart. "We need to talk," I said, the urgency in my voice cutting through the hum of the busy street. Our conversation quickly escalated, voices rising despite the public setting. Accusations and hurt feelings spilled out, an open display of our fractured relationship. "I need space. I can't do this here," she said, turning away, leaving me standing alone amidst the chaos of our unraveling lives. The solitude of the house echoed my turmoil, a stark reminder of the chasm between us. Betrayal, once a foreign concept in our marriage, had become its defining feature. With a heavy heart, I began the daunting task of preparing for divorce, each step feeling like a betrayal of the vows we once shared. During this tumultuous time, my friend, the one who had first opened my eyes to the affair, stood by me. "You'll get through this," he assured me, a rock amidst the swirling currents of my despair. His support was a lifeline, a reminder that I wasn't navigating this storm alone. Amidst the paperwork and legal consultations, word reached me that she was seeking advice on how to mend the rift, to win me back. It was a sliver of hope in a dark time, yet my heart was guarded, fortified against further hurt. Then, she returned home, her presence filling the space that had grown cold in her absence. "I'm sorry, and I want to make this right," she said, her eyes searching mine for any sign of forgiveness. The sincerity in her voice tugged at the frayed edges of my resolve. We sat down, embarking on a marathon discussion about our future, if such a thing still existed for us. The conversation was raw, a candid exploration of the pain we had inflicted upon each other and the monumental task of rebuilding trust. The path forward was fraught with uncertainty, yet the mere act of dialogue, of opening ourselves to the vulnerability of healing, felt like a tentative step towards reconciliation. As the night wore on, our words carved out a tentative ceasefire, a fragile foundation upon which to rebuild. The journey ahead promised to be arduous, marked by moments of doubt and fear, but the possibility of redemption, however distant, sparked a faint glow of hope in the darkness. The decision to give our marriage another chance felt like stepping onto uncertain ground, but it was a step I was willing to take. We laid down clear boundaries, a framework within which we hoped to rebuild what had been damaged. It was a tentative beginning, but it was a thaw. We invested time in each other, carving out moments from our days to reconnect. I noticed a shift in her behavior. She was more open, more willing to share her thoughts and feelings. It was a change that breathed a cautious hope into the hollow spaces of our relationship. To further this newfound connection, we planned a weekend getaway. It was an opportunity to step away from the reminders of our past struggles and focus solely on us. Those days were a blend of conversations, laughter, and shared silences that spoke volumes. It felt like we were rediscovering each other, finding new depths in familiar waters. However, upon our return, a shadow fell across the brightness of our rekindling. She fell ill, a persistent malaise that prompted a visit to the doctor. The atmosphere was tense, charged with an unspoken fear of what might be uncovered. The news she brought back shattered the fragile peace we had built. "I'm pregnant," she said, the words hanging between us like a sword. The joy that should have accompanied such news was absent, replaced by a heavy silence. The timing was suspicious, a cruel reminder of the chasm that had once divided us. The turmoil of emotions was overwhelming. The specter of past betrayals loomed large, casting doubt on the paternity of the child. It was a question I wished I never had to ask, a doubt that pained me to voice. "We need a paternity test," I said, the words feeling foreign on my tongue. Demanding a paternity test was a decision that came from a place of hurt and uncertainty. It was a step back into the shadows, even as we had been moving towards the light. The future of our family, our marriage, hinged on the results of that test. It was a moment that held both the possibility of complete shattering and the hope for a stronger rebuilding, but it was a step we had to take to move forward, wherever that path might lead. The days dragged on, each one heavier than the last, as we awaited the results of the paternity test. The air in our home was thick with the tension of unspoken fears and the weight of impending truths. Our conversations, once on the mend towards normalcy, now skirted around the giant elephant in the room, each of us lost in our whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. Then, the call came, a moment frozen in time. "I'm sorry," the voice on the other end said. "The results confirm you are not the father." The words struck with the force of a sledgehammer, shattering the fragile hope I had harbored. In that instant, The foundation of our rebuilt trust crumbled into dust. The revelation plunged us into a crisis unlike any we had faced before. Our marriage, already scarred by past betrayals, now teetered on the brink of an abyss. The future, once again, became a murky path, obscured by hurt and uncertainty. In the midst of this storm, she stood before me, tears in her eyes, voice trembling. "I'm so sorry. Please, can we find a way to get through this? Can we raise this child together?" Her plea cut through me, a stark reminder of the love that had once bound us, now intertwined with the pain of betrayal. Torn between the remnants of that love and the sharp sting of betrayal, I found myself at a crossroads. The decision before me was monumental, not just a matter of my relationship with her, but of the innocent life caught in our turmoil. Seeking guidance, I turned to friends and family, each conversation adding layers to my internal struggle. Opinions varied widely, from staunch support for a fresh start to warnings against the consequences of unresolved issues. The cacophony of advice left me more conflicted, a heart divided by love and hurt. In search of clarity, we returned to counseling, this time to navigate the treacherous waters of this new reality. The sessions were intense, raw opening of wounds and exploration of possibilities. We dissected our feelings, the deep-seated hurt, the lingering love, and the potential for forgiveness. Each session peeled back layers of pain and doubt, revealing glimpses of understanding and empathy. Yet, the journey was far from over. The path ahead promised challenges and required a strength I wasn't sure I possessed. But amidst the turmoil, a flicker of hope remained, a beacon guiding us through the uncertainty of what lay ahead. The decision to forgive wasn't made in a moment of clarity or a burst of enlightenment. It was a gradual realization, a deep understanding that the child, innocent in our turmoil, deserved a chance at a stable, loving family. My wife's plea for forgiveness, her remorse palpable, tipped the scales. Love, I realized, wasn't just a feeling but a choice to rebuild from the ruins of betrayal. Informing our families about the situation was our next step, one fraught with apprehension. The reactions were as varied as the individuals themselves, ranging from supportive understanding to palpable disappointment. Yet, beneath the cacophony of opinions, there was a thread of hope that we clung to, a belief in the possibility of redemption and healing. Preparations for the child's arrival marked a time of cautious optimism. Amidst discussions of names and nursery colors, there was an underlying current of our ongoing healing process. My wife severed all contact with the child's biological father, a decision that was both painful and necessary, underscoring her commitment to our family. The birth of the child was a watershed moment, bringing with it a deluge of emotions. The challenges were manifold, from sleepless nights to navigating our roles as parents under the shadow of past events. Yet, there were moments of undeniable joy, the first smile, the first steps, each a milestone that brought us closer together. Trust, once shattered, was painstakingly rebuilt, day by day, action by action. We focused on the well-being of our family, understanding that the foundation we laid now was critical for the future. Counseling sessions continued, a space where we could navigate our feelings and learn to communicate more effectively. The experience, as harrowing as it was, tested the very fabric of our marriage. Yet, rather than succumbing to the strain, we emerged stronger, more resilient. The commitment to each other, once questioned, was now renewed, fortified by the trials we had overcome. Accepting the child as my own was a journey in itself. Fatherhood, I discovered, transcends biology. It's a role defined by love, responsibility, and the unwavering support one provides. Embracing this role, I found a sense of purpose and fulfillment that transcended the initial turmoil. In the end, we emerged not unscathed, but undeniably stronger. Our marriage, tested by the fiercest of storms, stood as a testament to our resilience and commitment. The road ahead was still paved with challenges, but together, we faced it with a family stronger for the Have you ever considered that apartment life may be more than simply loud parties? Until I learned the reality about what was happening outside the walls of my apartment, I assumed that my neighbors were only complaining about the noise. My wife was having an affair with 2 other men, and I found out because they were spending the nights at my apartment. When I learned, I was astonished, but I made the decision to learn more and try to answer the riddle. I'll share this tale with you today, along with how I learned the reality of what was happening in my flat. Jaeger met Christina when he was already 33 years old. His eyes were drawn from the start to a gorgeous but slender, sickly-looking girl, out of sympathy and a desire to assist, and when they subsequently communicated and corresponded a bit, he understood he had fallen in love. Since Igor was in the military and frequently traveling, they kept in touch with Christina via social media. Christina worked as a social worker, taking care of the elderly. Almost every night, they would communicate through video chat, exchange the latest events, express their opinions, and even get a little wicked. Jaeger said, "I'll be there soon, and I'll kiss you." He sincerely missed Christina, and it had been 3 months since their last encounter. She said with a smile, "I can't wait," and Jaeger felt warm within. Jaeger was eager to pop the question to his lover while he was in town after seeing her upon his arrival. At the conclusion of the evening, he presented Christina a ring. He had planned a lovely celebratory supper for her at his house. She readily agreed without hesitation. Even before he could take the ring out of his pocket, he assumed she had said yes. He had a very simple wedding, brought his new bride into his flat, and then went once again for work. Christina felt miserable and lonely. She didn't fully appreciate the impact of her husband's presence in her life from phone calls and regular networking. One day, a friend extended an invitation to her for a stimulating game, assuring her wonderful company and a fun evening. Christina happily concurred. She greeted her squad after arriving at the designated location in time. There were 5 other males on the squad in addition to Christina. All of them, with the exception of Christine, attended university together and had a strong friendship. Christina requested that her buddy invite her more frequently since she enjoyed the game. She so kept herself occupied till Igor showed up. Christine abandoned the game when he was at home. She vowed to come back when Igor was gone, so the rest of the squad accepted it with grace. And that's what occurred. When Christina came back to the game that evening for the first time following the break, their team won, so they made plans to celebrate in the cafe. They stayed there until closing, and at that point, everyone in the group was inebriated. One of the males, Boris, followed Christina when it came time to depart. He had been openly flirting with her for a while, but this evening he became more daring and even kissed her. Christina phoned the man to her vacant apartment once the booze in her blood completed its job. They awoke in the same bed the next morning. Later, Boris visited her a few more times, which expertly made her lonely evenings more bearable. When Igor saw little bruises on his wife during their intimate moments, he became suspicious that something was wrong. When he inquired about their origin, Christina nervously stated that she had purchased them while attending a dancing lesson with a friend. They never brought up the topic again once Igor's vigilance was satisfied by the response. Later, Christina started having extramarital romances with 2 other members of their team in addition to Boris. When a neighbor stopped her on the stairs one day and threatened to tell Jaeger everything, she did not hesitate to bring them to her home. She first banned the trio from visiting her home, but when summer arrived, the watchful neighbor moved in with the cottage and Christina took over the old house. She twiddled her thumb at her temple and used foul language as she informed her buddy about Christina. Their interaction and participation in games came to a stop after that. Jaeger frequently saw the displeased looks of his neighbors while he was walking home. He was told by a married couple who lived directly above Jaeger and Christina's flat, and who had just had a kid, that their intimacy with his wife was particularly noisy and turbulent. He learned from them that Jaeger wasn't the only one who heard the groans. "Our apartment's groaning has drawn complaints from our neighbors. What are your thoughts about that?" That evening, he harshly questioned his wife. She was ashamed and said that she occasionally viewed intriguing films without her spouse. So to say, she did it to de-stress and raise her husband's expectations for his business trip. These comments stirred Jaeger, and he took Christina at her word. Autumn arrived. All of the city's roadways were covered with colorful leaves that had fallen from the trees. Jaeger eagerly anticipated his approaching holiday during the final days of his business trip. In order to surprise his wife, he booked a luxurious hotel stay and paid for a trip to the beach. That in mind, he made his way back home. Outside his home, he encountered Grigory Ilyich, a neighbor who had previously threatened to reveal Christina as he got out of the taxi. His expression was grave. He didn't even give Jaeger his customary greeting smile. He was greeted coldly by the neighbor, who then probed Jaeger for a while. Jaeger was surprised when the man entered the room from a distance and said, "Your wife doesn't waste any time. She's got men coming over, 3 of them." He began by talking about his life and his wife. His back collapsed as his pulse suddenly spiked. He regarded Grigory Ilyich as though he had just spoken the silliest thing possible. However, he could see by the man's entire demeanor that he was not lying. After saying thanks for the information to his neighbor, the latter yelled after him for Jaeger to make an adult introduction. The spouse then finished piecing everything together in his mind. The neighbors complained of the haymakers on his wife's body and the groans. Everything was apparent. Jaeger himself simply didn't see it, and Ilyich didn't want to either. Christina was meant to be in her house. When his train came, Jaeger contacted her from the train station. She gave him a warm hug and a grin as she welcomed him. When she saw her spouse was acting strangely, she kindly inquired as to what was happening. Jaeger fixed his gaze unblinkingly on his wife. He was unexpectedly confronted with an unloved lady from a weird, unpleasant woman who he had been dreaming about. He even had the impression that his wife smelled foreign and odd. Grigory Ilyich was seen. As Igor started, he saw Christina stumble and grip the door jamb. I was told something fascinating here. Christina's lips were trembling as she regarded him with fear. She became even pallid as Jaeger spoke. Christina sobbed irately to the ground, her hands covering her face. She did not contest the truth. She didn't hide anything. She just gave Jaeger the truth. He listened to her while he sat on a seat in the hallway. He abruptly said, "I'm going to sell the apartment." Christina cried even more when she said, "I can't live here after this. It's disgusting." She begged her husband to forgive her, but he simply shook his head and said, "Sorry." Jaeger wasn't dishonest. The very following day, he listed the flat for sale, and because he purposefully priced it low, purchasers came forward swiftly. He moved and divorced throughout his whole trip. On the other side, Christina went back to her mother. She couldn't even afford to rent an apartment on her wages as a social worker in a small town. In amazement, her mother sobbed for days. One of the three guys she had been hanging out with, Boris, admitted to her that they had battled about whether any of them could make a married lady feel sexually attracted to them. Christina was totally appalled by the news and humiliation she had received. She had foolishly believed that she liked the three of them simply. Christina sobbed and pondered about the whole thing for a while. She had lost touch with that business. She also lacked the time to look for a replacement. She made an effort to secure a part-time position so she could leave her mother's home. But she had plenty of time to reflect on how her own treachery had harmed her own life before she went to sleep. It was initially just a game that wasn't meant to have any lasting effects. She was only trying to cheat to see what would happen. But soon she found herself being sucked into a vortex of desire from which she was unable to escape. Today, I'll share with you the tale of a woman who, after initially preparing for a small change, ended herself on the verge of infidelity. For 5 years, Nikita and Dasha had been dating. After being married, they moved into Nikita's parents' old flat, which they later decided to leave to their kid after renting it out for a period. Nikita worked at a car dealership, while Dasha was a dental office administrator. They seldom argued and had a very equal relationship. At this point, Dasha started to exhibit an unexpected aspect to his personality. She used to reassure her husband that she truly enjoyed her job and that she could make money rather than just sit around the house doing nothing. But suddenly, she started to bring up his exhaustion from dealing with people more and more frequently. She occasionally brought up her pals, who their husbands had given the go-ahead for not working because they could support the entire family. Naturally, Nikita understood what she was trying to say. But as of now, he could not see how they could possibly make enough money to support both of them. He was eagerly anticipating an increase in income at work. He had recently met his manager and requested a raise. They promised to give him an answer when they had given it some thought. Nikita was regrettably unimpressed on the day they planned for another chat with his boss. The employer was informed that it could not reconsider his remuneration at this time. The man arrived home that evening in a bad temper. He still had to share this chat with his wife. She seems more concerned about her husband's choice. Dasha's agitation was as anticipated. She even became irritated at first. She had genuinely depended on her husband's promotion because it moved her closer to a higher level of living, if not a total release from her employment. She blamed her husband for not being persistent for a long period that day, and she remained silent the remainder of the evening. About a week has gone. The wife informed Nikita one day that she had chosen to take on additional shifts this month after letting some of her anger and complaints go. The couple was set to go on a vacation. For a very long time, she had wanted to get herself a new phone. The moment was right to increase income. The husband merely noted his wife's statements rather than engaging in an argument. "And you can clearly see from them that you haven't given me any gifts." The man even started considering how much cash he would need to save up for a new phone as a present and when he would need to do it. The suggestion was understood. I had added extra shifts at my clinic a month earlier, but the shift worker still hadn't returned from vacation. My husband occasionally wanted to inquire about her colleague, but he usually arrived in the evening, exhausted, and the thought entirely escaped his head. Nikita got up early one weekend. Dasha had departed for the shift and was no longer at home. He made a leisurely trip to the kitchen to prepare himself a cup of coffee, but was interrupted by an unexpected phone call. Alexander, a good friend of his, called. "Hello, are you up yet? Come on over," he said with concern in his voice. "Something serious, most likely." At this time, Nikita couldn't recall Sasha taking him anyplace. As Nikita hadn't even had time to eat at home before they met, he had just ordered himself breakfast as they entered the cafe. Remember our Grishka then? His companion was introduced. He recently went to place a veneer, and as you are aware, this pleasure is not inexpensive. Can the man, however, afford it? He owns a number of hotels. Nikita responded. Why did you call me to? To discuss having new teeth. He chuckled. How do I to inform you? He visited the clinic where your Dasha works, and that's the problem. She reportedly retained his number after the meeting and began messaging him from her own number. He made the decision to boast to me about how a clinic beauty was making advances toward him. I was immediately aware when I learned the dentist's name. At the same time, Nikita's appetite disappeared. He gently inquired as to the precise subject of his wife's letters to their common buddy. He informed him that she had been begging to meet him and openly flirting with him. They had even briefly crossed paths once, but it was simply for conversation and nothing more. But it was obvious that she had big aspirations. Grisha's phone number was requested by Nikita, who then called him that day. He spoke about the circumstance and inquired further about their encounter. She had, in fact, seen him on the day she was meant to have an additional shift. In other words, it's possible that her boyfriend didn't take a vacation. Dasha merely created an excuse for herself so she could meet other men without risk. In exchange for one of her additional shifts, the husband asked his acquaintance to set him up with Dasha. Moreover, just to be clear, this is a true love date, potentially with a continuation rather than merely a get-together to speak. And he will plan the continuation on his own. When Grigory realized he had been flirting with his old friend's wife, he was initially ashamed and did not even want to take part in the whole thing. But after some consideration, he came to the conclusion that his friend required assistance in order to surround everything. Grigory and Dasha met on the scheduled day at a restaurant. Additionally, Nikita was nearby on the street. While they were having a pleasant talk, the false lover signaled to his buddy that it was time for his wife, quite simply, started to flirt with him by holding his hand and making suggestions about prolonging the evening. Nikita entered the establishment and moved swiftly toward their table. Not even enough time for Dasha to take her fingers away. What's up, wife? Have you got a roving shift today? Her spouse mockingly inquired. Dasha grew pale as she made a dumbfounded face at her husband, averted her gaze, and made an effort not to meet his eyes. After detailing every interaction they had, Grigory concluded by saying, and you have seen the rest for yourself. When the husband tried to lift his wife off the table by grabbing her arm, she retreated in terror. I won't touch you, so let's leave. Get your belongings out of the flat and leave right now, her spouse said. Dasha gave no resistance since she knew her marriage was ended. Beginning the next week, Nikita reported to her place of employment to inform the director that their administrator had established a dating group for herself there. When Dasha's shift attendant learned that Dasha's husband had arrived, she informed him that Dasha had done this before. She promptly saved his number when she saw a customer enter with cash, then made an effort to strike up a conversation with him. It appears that she was seeking for a better and wealthier choice. 2 witness testimonies were sufficient. Dasha lost her job at the clinic. She was able to rent a tiny apartment, but because she was out of work, she was unable to renew the lease. She then temporarily moved in with friends while seeking for a new career. She still had a solid list of possible suitors, of course. None of them, however, rushed to respond to the obnoxious woman. Nikita soon started living alone and filed for divorce. And because of the circumstances surrounding his ex-wife, he came to his own views. He then purposefully assessed the mercantilism of his prospective picks for mistresses. Thankfully, his buddy Grisha was now willing to assist him as well. Such a life narrative is given here. What do you think of this circumstance and the character's actions? Let us know in the comments. I appreciate you taking the time to read the entire story. Remember to sign up for the story channel for you. Moreover, be sure you like this video, and by doing that, you will greatly aid in channel promotion. Hey there, I'm Mark, just your regular guy who happens to dabble in software engineering. My life was pretty standard, until that one week turned everything upside down. So, let me take you back to when it all started. I was out in Europe for this big tech seminar, the kind that has you wearing name tags and pretending to understand accents from 6 different countries. It was supposed to be this week-long affair, but, as luck would have it, things wrapped up a day early. Most folks would be bummed about losing a day in Europe, but me? All I could think about was getting back to Linda, my wife. We've been hitched for 15 years, and she's one of those school teachers that kids and parents love, a real gem. I'm standing there at the seminar and my boss, this no-nonsense guy who rarely cracks a smile, comes up and says, "Great job, Mark. You can head home early if you want." I'm thinking, heck yeah, I'm getting out of here. But here's the catch. I didn't tell Linda. I thought, why not surprise her? You see, we're that couple who still tries to keep things exciting. Surprise dates, impromptu road trips, the whole shebang. So, there I am, hustling through the airport, trying to catch an earlier flight. But, of course, it couldn't be that easy. My usual airport is an hour north of our cozy little suburban home, but I end up finding a flight to this smaller airport, almost 2 hours to the south. Never used it before, but hey, adventure, right? I get on the flight, it's cramped. My knees are hugging my chest, and the guy next to me is snoring like a bear. But I'm buzzing with excitement, thinking about Linda's face when she sees me. I land, grab a rental car, one of those tiny things that you pray doesn't fall apart on the highway, and start my midnight road trip back home. Now, picture this. I'm pulling into our driveway, it's just shy of midnight, and the street's quiet, like one of those scenes from a movie where you know something's about to happen. But the house? It's dark, pitch black, and Linda's car? Nowhere in sight. My heart's doing this funny little dance in my chest, not the good kind. I'm lugging my suitcase inside, trying to make sense of it. Where could she be at this hour, right? I'm not one to jump to conclusions, so I fish out my phone and dial her number. It rings, and finally, she picks up on the third ring. Her voice is groggy, like I just woke her up. Hey hun, just checking in. Everything okay? I ask, trying to sound casual. She's all, yeah, it's past midnight. I was sleeping. See you at the airport tomorrow morning, right? Now, I'm standing there, phone in hand, feeling like I've just walked into a weird movie. I'm like, sleeping, but not at home. I play it cool, though. Yeah. See you tomorrow. I stay, and we hang up. But get this. I call our home phone, and guess what? It rings just fine. So, the whole, phone's broken, story? Not adding up. I'm not Sherlock Holmes or anything, but something's fishy. So, I start doing the only logical thing. I search the house. You know, under the bed, in the closets, the usual hiding spots. But nope, no Linda, no nothing. Just me and a whole lot of silence. So, there I am, sitting in our dark living room, thinking, what now, Mark? I've always considered myself a pretty sharp guy, not easily fooled. But right then, I couldn't shake off the feeling that I was missing a huge piece of the puzzle. And that, my friends, is where it all began. Little did I know, that night was just the opening act of a show I never bought tickets for. Alright, so where did I leave off? Oh yeah, sitting in my dark living room, feeling like the lead in a mystery movie I never auditioned for. So, I decide it's time for some good old-fashioned detective work. And by detective work, I mean sitting on the couch, trying to piece together the puzzle with a bag of stale potato chips. It's getting late, or early, depending on how you look at it, and I'm just about ready to call it a night when I spot something on the kitchen table. It's a receipt from some fancy hotel downtown, dated for that very night. Now, I'm no genius, but I know Linda wouldn't be at a hotel for a school project. My mind's racing with possibilities, none of them good. But I needed to know, you know? So, I do what any reasonable person would do at 1 a.m. I drive to the hotel. I'm half hoping I'm wrong, that there's a perfectly logical explanation for all this. I get to the hotel, and it's one of those places with a shiny lobby and a doorman who looks at you like you're lost. I wander in, trying to blend in with the late-night crowd. And there, in the corner of the lobby lounge, is Linda. But she's not alone. She's laughing and chatting with some guy I've never seen before. He's got that. I spend more time in the gym than at work. Look. Now, I'm standing there, feeling like I've been sucker punched. I duck behind a potted plant. Classic spy move, right? And listen in. And let me tell you, the things I heard. It's like listening to a soap opera, but worse, because it's your life. They're talking about sneaking away for weekend trips, secret messages, the whole 9 yards. My head's spinning, and I'm trying to process it all. It's like one of those moments when you realize the quiet life you thought you had is anything but. I could have walked up to them, made a scene, but I didn't. I had a different plan brewing. I sneak out of the hotel and drive back home, my mind working overtime. By the time I get back, it's almost dawn, and I've got it. A plan to bring this whole charade out into the open. So, there I was, back at home, reeling from what I'd just seen at the hotel. Linda, my Linda, laughing it up with some mystery guy. Felt like a gut punch, you know? But I wasn't about to let this slide without digging deeper. No way. The next day, instead of confronting her or blowing up her phone, I play it cool. I call her up and spin a tale. Hey hun, looks like this seminar's going into overtime. Won't be back till next week. She sounds relieved, says she'll miss me, but I can hear that edge in her voice, the one that says she's got other plans. I start tailing her, keeping it low-key. Sounds crazy, right? But I had to know the full story. Turns out, Linda's got a whole routine. Fancy dinners, late nights, the works. And always with Mr. Muscles, as I've started calling him in my head. Each day, I'm piecing together more of the puzzle. They're not just flings or one-time things. This is serious. They're talking about future plans, sneaking away for weekends, even joking about a life together. It's like watching someone else's life fall apart, except it's mine. And the more I find out, the angrier I get. But anger's like a fire, right? Gotta channel it right, or it burns everything down. So, I hatch a plan. A plan to expose this whole charade for what it is, a sham. I don't call our friends or family, not yet. First, I need solid proof, something undeniable. I'm talking photos, receipts, the kind of evidence you see in courtroom dramas. It's meticulous work, tracking their movements, snapping pics without being seen. I feel like a character in a spy novel, only the stakes are my marriage. So there I am. Mark the makeshift detective, tailing Linda and her gym buddy-turned-lover, whom I've dubbed Mr. Muscles in my head. Each day, I'm gathering bits and pieces, snapshots of their secret world. It's like putting together a jigsaw puzzle, except every piece is a stab in the heart. During my sleuthing, I stumble upon something, or rather, someone interesting. Mr. Muscles has a wife. Yeah, plot thickens, right? She's this elegant woman, living in the suburbs, probably unaware her husband is playing Casanova in the city. Now, I'm thinking, Mark, you've got to meet this lady. But how? I can't just knock on her door and say, hey, our spouses are having an affair. So, I cook up a plan. I find out where she works, a local art gallery, and plan A, chance, encounter. I walk in one afternoon, pretending to be an art enthusiast. There she is, graceful, maybe a bit lonely. We strike up a conversation about some abstract painting. I'm nodding and smiling, not understanding a thing about it. We get to talking, and I gently steer the conversation towards personal life. She mentions her husband, how he's often away for business. My inside screaming, if only you knew, lady. I keep visiting the gallery, building a rapport with her. Then, one day, I drop the bomb. I think our spouses might be more than just colleagues, I say, showing her a photo of Linda and Mr. Muscles a bit too cozy at a cafe. She's shocked, devastated. I can see the realization dawning on her, the pieces falling into place in her mind. But she's strong, you know, doesn't crumble. Instead, she asks, what do we do now? That's when I lay out my plan. Let's expose them, but in a way they'd never see coming, I suggest. She's hesitant at first, but then there's this fire in her eyes. She's in. So, there I am, with all this evidence of Linda's infidelity, feeling like my whole world's flipped upside down. But I'm not about to let this slide without making a statement, a big one. I start plotting a grand reveal, something that'll show everyone the truth about Linda and Mr. Muscles. I decide to throw a surprise gathering at our house, the place where they often meet up, thinking they're safe in our little love nest. I call up our friends, family, even some of Linda's colleagues. Tell them we're throwing an impromptu party to celebrate an unexpected business success of mine. Everyone's excited, praising me for my hard work, completely unaware of the real drama about to unfold. The plan's simple. Have everyone hide in the living room, lights off, waiting for Linda and Mr. Muscles to walk into their not-so-secret rendezvous. Then, bam, lights on, and the truth's out for all to see. The day arrives, and our house is buzzing with whispered anticipation. Friends and family are tucked away, some hiding behind furniture, others in adjoining rooms, all waiting for the big moment. Linda and Mr. Muscles, clueless about the setup, stroll in, lost in their own little world. They're laughing, touching, starting to get real cozy, thinking they're alone. I'm watching from my hiding spot, heart pounding, waiting for the perfect moment. And then, when they're just about to cross a line they can't come back from, I hit the lights. The room erupts in gasps and murmurs. Linda and Mr. Muscles freeze like deer in headlights. The look of shock, embarrassment, guilt, it's all there, painted across their faces. Our friends and family are in utter disbelief. Some are shaking their heads, others looking away, unable to believe what they're seeing. Linda's sister, who's always been her champion, looks like she's about to cry. My best friend, who's known us since college, just stares, his expression a mix of anger and pity. Linda's colleagues, who've always seen her as the perfect professional, are whispering among themselves, their respect for her visibly crumbling. And there, in the midst of it all, is Linda's mother, her face a picture of shock and disappointment. As for Mr. Muscles, he's stammering, trying to make sense of the situation, But there's no talking his way out of this one. His eyes dart around the room, looking for an escape, but there's none to be found. Linda's trying to speak, to explain, but her words are lost in the chaos of the moment. The truth's out, and there's no hiding from it now. The facade of the perfect marriage, the ideal life, it's all come crashing down in the most public way possible. The aftermath is a blur. Some guests leave, unable to handle the tension. Others stay, offering me their support, their expressions a mix of sympathy and disbelief. Linda's left standing there, her secret life exposed, her world shattered just as much as mine. And me? I'm feeling a whirlwind of emotions. Relief that the truth's finally out, anger at the betrayal, sadness at what's been lost. But above all, there's a sense of closure. The lies are over, and now, it's time to start picking up the pieces. The room's still echoing with the last traces of the night's drama. There I am, standing in the wreckage of what used to be my life, surrounded by the stunned faces of friends and family. Linda's standing there, looking like she's been hit by a freight train. Mr. Muscles, well, he's already slinked out the door, tail between his legs. The air's thick with tension, unspoken questions hanging like heavy clouds. Linda's sister, Karen, is the first to break the silence. She's always been the peacemaker, the one who tries to find the good in everyone. But even she can't mask her disappointment. Linda, how could you? She whispers, more in sorrow than in anger. Linda's colleagues, some of them close friends of ours for years, shuffle uncomfortably. I can see the respect they once had for her dissolving in front of my eyes. It's one thing to hear rumors. It's another to see the truth laid bare in your living room. Then there's Linda's mother, a stern woman who's always valued family above all else. The look she gives Linda is one I can't quite decipher. It's a mix of anger, heartbreak, and maybe, just maybe, a hint of understanding. But she doesn't say a word. She doesn't have to. As the night wears on, the guests begin to leave, offering me sympathetic pats on the back and awkward, mournful looks. I'm left alone with Linda in the deafening silence. She tries to speak, to explain, but what's there to say? The trust is broken, the damage done. Finally, she says something that catches me off guard. I never meant to hurt you, Mark. I lost my way. Her voice is a silence like a knife. I want to be angry, to shout and rage at her. But all I feel is a profound sadness, a sense of loss so deep it's almost physical. I know, I reply, and it's the truth. I do know. People don't just wake up one day and decide to wreck their lives. It happens bit by bit, choice by choice. And maybe, in some way, I played a part in it too. The house feels empty as the last guest leaves. It's just Linda and me, standing amidst the ruins of our marriage. We talk, not about us, but about practical things, living arrangements, finances, how we'll explain this to our friends and family. As dawn breaks, Linda packs a bag and leaves. I watch her drive away, and there's a moment where I almost call out to her, ask her to stay and work it out. But some things, once broken, can't be fixed. And maybe, just maybe, it's better this way. In the silence of the morning, I sit down with a cup of coffee, staring at the mess in the living room, the remnants of the party that wasn't really a party. And I realize that this is it, the first day of the rest of my life. It's a daunting thought, starting over. But there's also a sense of freedom, a chance to rebuild, to find out who I am when I'm not part of Mark and Linda. It's not going to be easy, but then again, the best things in life rarely are. So, with the morning sun streaming through the window, I make a promise to myself to learn from this, to grow, and to never lose sight of who I am again. Because in the end, that's all we really have, ourselves, our choices, and the paths we choose to walk. The days following the party-turned revelation are a blur of emotions and decisions. The house, once filled with love and laughter, now echoes with the silence of absence. I go through the motions, dealing with the fallout, answering calls from concerned friends and family, but inside, I'm numb. But life, as it tends to do, keeps moving. I return to work, throwing myself into projects and meetings, anything to keep my mind occupied. My colleagues, aware of the situation, offer a mix of sympathy and space. It's appreciated, but there's this unspoken understanding that the Mark and Linda they knew is no more. In the quiet of the evenings, I find myself reflecting on everything. How did we get here? Were there signs I missed? Could I have done something differently? It's a dangerous spiral, and I have to constantly remind myself not to get sucked into the abyss of what-ifs. A couple of weeks later, I get a call from Karen, Linda's sister. She's been caught in the middle of this, trying to support Linda while also understanding my pain. We meet for coffee, a neutral ground to talk. Karen looks tired, worn down by the family drama. She's struggling. Mark, Karen says softly, stirring her coffee. Not that it excuses anything, but she's lost too. I nod, understanding. Despite everything, I can't help but feel a pang of concern for Linda. I hope she finds what she's looking for, I reply, and I mean it. Karen gives me a small, sad smile. And you, Mark, what are you looking for now? Her question catches me off guard. What am I looking for? Redemption? Closure? A new beginning? I'm not sure. All I know is that I can't stay anchored to the past. The conversation with Karen is a turning point. It makes me realize that holding on to anger and resentment won't change what happened. It's time to let go, not for Linda, but for me. I start to make changes, small at first. Rearranging the furniture, taking down some old photos, creating a space that feels more like mine and less like ours. It's therapeutic in a way, a physical manifestation of the internal changes I'm going through. I reconnect with old friends, some of whom I'd lost touch with over the years. We meet for drinks, catch up on life, and their company reminds me of who I was before Linda. It's like rediscovering parts of myself that I had forgotten. One evening, I find myself at a local community center, signing up for a cooking class. It's something I've always wanted to do but never got around to. Surrounded by strangers, all there for different reasons, I feel a sense of camaraderie. We're all here, trying to learn something new, to add a little flavor to our lives. As the weeks turn into months, the raw pain of the betrayal fades into a dull ache. It's still there, a part of my story, but it no longer defines me. I'm finding joy in small things. A well-cooked meal, a night out with friends, a quiet evening with a good book. And then, there's Sarah, Mr. Muscle's wife. We've kept in touch, two people bound by a shared experience of betrayal. There's a comfort in our interactions, an understanding that doesn't need words. We meet occasionally for coffee, offering each other support and a listening ear. One evening, as we're laughing over a shared joke, I realize how much I've come to value her company. She's smart, funny, and resilient. There's a connection there, something that goes beyond our shared pain. But I'm cautious, aware that both of us are still healing. As the year comes to a close, I find myself reflecting on the journey I've been on. It's been a road marked by pain, discovery, and growth. I'm not the same person I was a year ago, and that's okay. I've learned that life is unpredictable, but it's also full of possibilities. I don't know what the future holds, but I'm ready to face it. With each passing day, I'm building a new life, one that's authentically mine. And for the first time in a long time, I'm excited to see what comes next. If you liked what you've read and want to stay updated on more stories, insights, or just life reflections, go ahead and hit that like button. It really helps me out and lets me know you're there and interested. And if you haven't already, consider subscribing. That way, you won't miss out on any new chapters in this ever-evolving story of life, love, and learning. Trust me, there's a lot more to come, and I'd love for you to be part of this journey. So, like, subscribe, and join me as we navigate the twists and turns of this adventure called life. Thanks for being here, and I can't wait